The night breathes blood, a metallic exhalation that seeps from the very stones of Wallachia, where darkness has a name, and that name is Vlad. How does a man become a legend of terror? How do the whispers of brutality transform into thunderous historical echoes that reverberate through centuries? In the fractured landscape of 15th century Eastern Europe, where empires collide and kingdoms tremble like wounded animals, one figure emerges, not just a ruler, but a profound psychological storm that would reshape the very conception of human cruelty. Vlad Dracula, born into a world of serpentine political intrigue, where survival meant wielding violence like a scalpel, precision being as crucial as the cutting edge itself. His father, Vlad Dracul, had initiated him into a realm where mercy was a luxury neither statecraft nor survival could afford. The Order of the Dragon, a Byzantine knighthood dedicated to defending Christianity against Ottoman expansion, was not merely a noble tradition, but a blood covenant that would mark Vlad's entire existence. Imagine a child watching his homeland bleed, not through metaphor, but through actual rivers of crimson, invasions, betrayals, political assassinations, weaving a tapestry of constant violence. The Ottoman Empire's relentless expansion pressed against Wallachia's borders like a predator's fangs, and young Vlad learned early that diplomacy was often just a prelude to slaughter. His first true baptism of political trauma came during his adolescent years as a hostage in the Ottoman court, a diplomatic exchange meant to ensure his father's compliance. But hostage implies passivity, and Vlad was anything but passive. Within those alien marble halls, he absorbed strategies of psychological warfare, observing how power could be maintained through calculated terror. What transforms a human into a symbol of unimaginable brutality? Is it continuous exposure to violence, or something more fundamental, a psychological architecture that views human life as a landscape to be sculpted through pain? Vlad's methods of execution were not random acts of savagery, but meticulously designed performances of terror. Impalement, his signature method, was more than mere killing. It was architecture of fear, a three-dimensional statement about power that transformed human bodies into a forest of suffering, a living, or more accurately dying, warning to potential enemies. Picture a landscape where thousands of bodies rise like grotesque wooden sculptures, their expressions frozen in eternal agony. Not just enemies, but entire populations, men, women, children, transformed into a macabre exhibition of political messaging. Each impaled body was a syllable in Vlad's language of domination. Each writhing form a grammatical construction of absolute authority. The psychological impact was deliberate. When Ottoman scouts discovered this human forest, many were so traumatized they retreated without battle. Vlad understood something profound about human nature, that physical pain is temporary, but the imagination of potential suffering can paralyze entire armies. His war against the Ottomans was not just military but mythological. He didn't merely fight. He constructed narratives of terror that would echo far beyond his immediate geographical context. Reports of his brutality spread like a contagion, transforming him from a regional prince to a European nightmare. But who was the man behind the mythology? Vlad was no mere psychopath, but a complex political strategist operating in a world where survival demanded absolute ruthlessness. Wallachia sat at a geographical crossroads, perpetually threatened by larger empires. Diplomacy was a veneer. Real power spoke through blood and iron. His relationship with truth was as complicated as his relationship with mercy. Historical records blend fact and legend, creating a palimpsest where reality is constantly rewritten. Was he a defender of his people or a monster who happened to protect them? Perhaps he was both, a quantum state of human complexity where heroism and horror coexist. Consider the psychological landscape of a ruler who sees his primary tool of governance as fear. Each impalement was not just an execution, but a speech, each body a paragraph in a text of absolute domination. Vlad didn't just kill his enemies. He semiotically reconstructed the very meaning of political authority. The Ottoman Sultan reportedly became so disturbed by Vlad's reputation that intelligence reports about him read more like Gothic horror than military correspondence. Imagine diplomatic missives describing not troop movements, but forests of dying men, their bodies rising like a grotesque agricultural crop of suffering. Religious context is crucial. Vlad lived in a world where Christianity and Islam were not just theological positions, but geopolitical forces. His brutality was not separate from his sense of religious mission, but intricately woven into it. What drives a human to such extremes? Is it trauma, political necessity, or something more fundamental about the human capacity for cruelty? Vlad emerged from a world where political boundaries were written in blood, where survival was a daily negotiation with death. In the end, his legacy would transcend his historical moment. Bram Stoker's Dracula would transform this historical figure into a mythological vampire, but the real Vlad was far more terrifying, because he was human. A human capable of constructing landscapes of suffering with the same detachment an architect might design a cathedral. The stones of Wallachia still whisper, not with nostalgia, but with a raw, visceral memory of a prince who understood that true power is not about conquest, but about the ability to make an entire civilization tremble